Welcome back to Combat Mission, where we're going to look at Buddy Aid. If you've seen almost any of my videos, it should be pretty obvious that I'm not one of the leave no pixeltruppen behind crowd, and it's quite rare for me to intentionally go around and Buddy Aid my casualties, but I know that some of the players make sure they do. So the question is, am I missing something? Is there anything to be gained by making sure the pixeltruppen get Buddy Aided? And if so, is it worth it? So what I have here is a saved turn with a platoon's worth of casualties. It's a late war US rifle platoon, so 39 casualties to be exact. And I'm going to bring over a live platoon and do some Buddy Aid to see what happens. One important note is that while I'm doing this in Battle for Normandy, all the combat mission games use the same engine, so how it works here is how it'll work across the board. Buddy Aid is what the manual refers to as an automatic action, so you can't specifically order your pixeltruppen to Buddy Aid. It's something they'll decide to do on their own if they're close enough to a casualty and providing they think that it's safe. Of course, just because the pixeltruppen think they're safe doesn't mean that they are, which can be a bit of a pain in certain circumstances. The medic animation involves them being up on their knees, so if they're prone in long grass behind a wall or something like that, they will quite happily stick their heads up and expose themselves to enemy fire if they decide to Buddy Aid. The best way to avoid this is to simply crawl them away from the casualty. They're only going to play medic if they're in the same action square. Now that some of the pixeltruppen are finishing up, we get the most immediately noticeable effect of Buddy Aid. The casualty disappears. There's not much to say about this. I suppose it denies some visual feedback to the enemy, but I can't think of any situations where hiding the bodies would be more effective than, say, shooting at things or finding somewhere else to be. The other immediate effect of Buddy Aid requires a little comparison. If we compare the details for the aiding squads before and after all the casualties have been dealt with, then we can see they've changed a little. When pixeltruppen Buddy Aid, they have a chance to salvage weapons and ammunition from casualties. So we can see that Squad 3 has acquired extra BARs, a second Springfield marksman rifle, another 14 hand grenades, a spare set of binoculars, and a radio from the Dead Platoon HQ. So Squad 3 has beefed up its firepower and capabilities quite significantly. The pixeltruppen are not guaranteed to reclaim everything from casualties, and if they do choose to rearm themselves, they might not do so in the most effective way. Squad 1's leader, for example, has swapped his Thompson submachine gun for a BAR, which may not be what you want. Also important to note here is how the ammunition count has changed in this case. The squad has lost 30 rounds of 45 caliber ammunition, which would correspond to the number of rounds inside the squad leader's Thompson, meaning that he's not only left a fully loaded Thompson on the floor where anybody can nab it, but he still has 5 magazines of 45 caliber submachine gun ammunition in his pouches, which he doesn't have a compatible weapon for. I haven't tested this in depth enough to be sure, but I suspect pixeltruppen picking up a new weapon will only bring whatever ammunition is loaded into it at the time. This isn't an issue for factions with good ammunition interchangeability. The US rifle squads here use 30 caliber M2 for their Garans, BARs and Springfield, so there is plenty of ammunition for our squad leader's newly looted BAR. But for units with a lot of different calibers in their squads, this could potentially be an issue. It's most noticeable with anti-tank weapons, which seem to be reclaimed with only a single round. Nevertheless, picking up weapons, ammunition and equipment like this has obvious utility. Almost every squad has a few pixeltruppen carrying more specialist weapons or equipment, and inevitably these are the first soldiers to go down when things hit the fan. Buddy Aid represents a chance to regain important assets. Finally, if we compare the endgame screens pre and post Buddy Aid, we can see that we get some slightly different numbers. If we don't treat the casualties, then we get 29 dead and 10 wounded. If we do treat them, then we get 23 dead and 16 wounded, which is the same number of dead and wounded represented by the actual bodies on the map. So what we're seeing here is that if we Buddy Aid a wounded casualty, then he is stabilized and remains wounded. Whereas if we don't, there's a chance, a 25% chance according to the manual that he will degrade to killed in action at the end game screen. The caveat to this, just in case you were thinking this was quite useful, is that we can also see the score for the Germans, and this does not change. In both cases they get 157 points. These points come from the number of casualties they've inflicted, so we can see that the ratio between dead and wounded doesn't impact the results in any way. The game doesn't care whether pixeltruppen are dead, wounded or missing for the purposes of calculating the score. It's only measuring how many pixeltruppen are incapable of fighting at the end. In other words, while buddy aiding your casualties might stop them from dying, it has no tangible advantage in game terms. To round off with a few other details, you cannot buddy aid casualties in vehicles. The game classes them as dead and there is nothing you can do about it, and you cannot buddy aid the enemy no matter how much you want to steal their stuff. How long it takes depends on whether the casualty is wounded or dead. The pixeltruppen don't waste time trying to stem the bleeding if the casualty is already gone, and on the difficulty level. The higher the difficulty, the longer it takes. So, buddy aid. In tangible, concrete terms, it is only good for regaining weapons, equipment and ammunition from your dead pixeltruppen. This can be a non-trivial element of the game. It has the potential to turn things around, especially with anti-tank weapons. Taking out the enemy's last tank with a looted Panzerschreck, bazooka, Piat or RPG could easily be enough to tip the scales of a game in your favour. That of course is the concrete benefit to buddy aid in game terms. If you think it's realistic to clear your casualties, or it gives you a warm fuzzy feeling to make sure your pixeltruppen don't die, then as long as it's safe to do so and you have spare units hanging around, then there's nothing wrong with buddy aiding to your heart's content. It's not going to hurt. You never know, you might end up with a meme-worthy unit or two. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, hope you found it useful, and I'll catch you in the next one.